Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. Today, I'm speaking with Mike Michalowicz. Mike is an entrepreneur behind 3 multi-million-dollar companies, and he's the author of Profit First, The Pumpkin Plan, and what Business Week deemed the entrepreneur's cult classic, The Toilet Paper Entrepreneurwe. Mike's a former small business columnist for the Wall Street Journal and the former business makeover specialist on MSNBC. Today, he travels the world as an entrepreneurial advocate, speaking to groups just like ours. He is globally recognized as the guy who challenges outdated business beliefs and teaches us what to do about it. He has a new book that has just been released called Clockwork, and we're going to talk about that in our program today. Mike is a friend of mine. I am a Profit First certified professional and have been since 2015 as an early adopter. And so I've known Mike for a couple of years. He is so funny and so smart, full of information. I just love his books. And in our conversations today, of course, we're going to talk about profit. There's no way we couldn't. But we're going to talk about it, of course, broader and deeper than just the term that we would use for money. So we're going to talk a little bit about Profit First and how that came about, and real revenue, what that really means, how to tell what the real value of a company is. We're going to talk about the difference between sustainability and responsibility as it relates to the numbers in your business. We're going to switch and talk a little bit about ideal clients and target markets, how we make decisions in our business, and what do we do when the business changes. You don't want to miss this episode. It is so full of information. I'm going to have Mike on so we can talk about it again and again. So without further delay, enjoy. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Michelle. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and I am super excited that you are with us today on Profit is a Choice. When I was thinking about launching the podcast, I knew there was no way I could do it without bringing you on.
Oh, well, that's so kind. I love that you're doing this. I think you have such an important message, so it's a privilege to be your guest.
Thank you so much. So, Mike, I met you back in 2015. Yep. And I've told a story on other podcasts and in writing and things that I've done. But I got your book, or I mentioned to your book from one of my clients, my coaching clients. And she said to me, Michelle, it sounds like this guy wrote the book that you haven't written yet, because he's talking about the same things that you talk about. And I was like, who is this guy that's written these things? And so I got your book. I read it in one sitting. And then I called, and Ron called me back. And I was like, okay, this is my story. And I feel like, Mike and I are living these parallel lives. We use the same analogies. Yep. I've got to be a part of this. What are we going to do now? And that was August, right before the first ProfitCon.
Yep. Yeah, you're one of the early adopters. It takes courage. Like, it's interesting. The message that you were sharing that I put in the book, this message is shared for centuries. Like, there's a book called The Richest Man in Babylon. It was devoted to this principle. Dave Ramsey, who's phenomenal, talks about this in personal finance. There's a book called Think and Grow Rich, talks about these principles. I just took it, and put his own fresh, I shouldn't say fresh, but a different approach to business, like you've been talking about. And so the message I don't think is new. I think the power is that it's a slightly different perspective for business owners specifically. But then there's you out there, Michelle, that you're helping businesses implement this, because the theory is powerful, but it only works if you implement it. And every business does have its nuances.
Right.
There unexpected things come up, unique challenges. So the fact that you're actually delivering this to people, I think that's the real juice.
Well, thanks. And I'll tell you, you're right. I do think every industry is a little bit different in their approach, even how they recognize profit, when they recognize profit, and then with the systems that they have in place. And so understanding an industry and then trying to put that on top of it can be a challenge to do by yourself without a professional. So I'm just thankful that there are professionals that you all train so that we can help everybody.
And I'm, it's going to be like this thank fest back and forth. I'm thankful. I'm thankful that you're doing what you're doing. And there's these other professionals who are pursuing verticals or a specific community to serve. This is an estimate. We think it's realistic. We know now there's over 75,000 companies that have implemented Profit First under the guidance. A large portion is under the guidance of a Profit First professional. And we now have experienced verticals from pizza shops. We have actually a chain, a very famous chain that's implemented Profit First, to accounting professionals, manufacturers, dog walkers. It's a wide breadth of businesses. So it points to all businesses can benefit from the most basic principle is take your profit first, which sounds backwards, but when money comes in, immediately take your profit first, hide it away, and run your business off the rest. And what it does is it forces us to reverse engineer profitability. So the concept's easy. The stick-to-itness is the important part. It's like having a trainer at a gym. We all know we need to exercise, but if you really are committed to it, have a trainer who teaches you to do the proper exercises, holds you accountable, can guide, as you make improvements, can guide you to a higher level of performance.
So that is interesting. That was the book that introduced me to you. Okay. But it wasn't your first book. It was your third. And so I have a question, just a general question. And then I want to talk about each of your books and talk about how profit is seriously the strand that goes through all of them, even though the lessons are different in each. They literally resonate with everything that I'm doing on the podcast, that profit's not an accident and it's not a one-time, activity. It happens from a string of choices. Have you found that your definition of profit has changed over the years from the time that you started your very first company to where you are today?
Yeah, it has. It has. I now define profit as sustainability. I used to define it as financial freedom, and it's still part of it. But profit means that as long as I continue the profitability of my company, I can continue to deliver what I intend to for my community. And the more profitable I am, the more impactful I can be. The most fascinating thing is I've discovered now is that my clients, your clients want their vendors to be profitable. Now, they don't use those words. They don't say, oh, make as much money off of my sweat as you can. No, they don't want us to gouge them. But could you imagine going to a client saying, we are surviving check by check. We're barely getting by. We're scrounging. Actually, I don't even have enough money to put food on the table. And we'd love to serve you because I'm dying. I mean, how would your client feel? They'd be, oh my gosh, I may invest in this business and they go out of business. That's a very fearful position for our clients to be in. So my realization is that clients want our sustainability. That's what they want. The definition of sustainability is profitability. If you aren't comfortable in your life and your business, it brings that discomfort to the client experience. So I want you to be profitable as your client. My clients want me to be profitable because they want me to be around, sustainable, and delivering on my promises. So that's brought about this new realization that profitability is sustainability, and our clients want that sustainability.
You know what I love about that so much? I'm writing that word down right now. When we go in to, let's say, make a sale to our ideal client, target market, and we don't have profitability to be sustainable, we literally break the trust. And how often do we teach know, like, trust? If they know you and they like you and they like you, they trust you, they spend money. Well, we've broken trust the minute they think that we're either going, away and are not going to be there, or they start thinking you're bringing drama every time I work with you. So even if I love your work, here's the drama of you can't pay the bills. It creates the exact environment we don't want to be in and that we're trying to get out of.
I originally looked at only sales. I was very sales oriented. And I now have a new word for sales. I believe it is a stress factor. Sales is responsibility. So while profit is sustainability, sales is responsibility. And what I mean by this is every time, say I'm your client, and every time you sell me something, that actually puts an obligation, Michelle, back on you. You have to now deliver on your promise. So I give you X dollars, but you have to show up for that phone call or do whatever. Many businesses are sales oriented. We need to grow to $1 million. We need to grow to $10 million. And I'm making a face because that's what I was like. We need to have a $10 million organization.
Right.
What I was saying was, I want to have $10 million of responsibility. The greater that number gets, the greater the responsibility. The greater the responsibility, the more stress it puts on me. What if we don't deliver? Do we have enough resources? Mm-hmm. So the more my business generates an income, it puts more stress on me. The anti-stress potion, if you will, is profitability. That brings the balance. So with greater responsibility, we must have greater sustainability. I think that's the correlation between those numbers that we have to understand. And I also believe, like we were talking about your business, I got goosebumps as we were talking. I still have them. I'm just thinking about it. You've brought about such sustainability that the top line revenue, that's nice. It's really how much you are earning. I personally aspire to have a smaller revenue business, smaller responsibility with greater sustainability, greater profit. I am more impressed by a business that does, say, $300,000 in revenue and the owner's taking home $200,000. That's mind-blowing as compared to a company where the business makes $2 million in revenue and the owner's taking home $70,000. It's a shame that we, as an entrepreneurial humanity, have been braggadocious about our top line. I think we should put pride now in the bottom line, pride in the profit, the health of a business, not the responsibility, the sales of a business.
Okay, so if I can just go, amen, we could almost be done at this point, right?
Yeah.
Right. Because even in my coaching practice, Mike, I've had clients come in with 3 and 4 million top line sales, and they were losing a couple $100,000 a year. No net profit. And then I've had clients come in because I'm in the interior design industry and that are just getting started that might have 100,000 in sales, but they're bringing home 50. Yeah. And I'll take the $100,000 business that brings home 50 over 4 million that loses a couple $100,000 every single time without thinking and twice on Sundays. I'll take it.
Amen to that. I agree wholeheartedly. The aspiration for big business, though, is wired into us because if we look at traditional accounting principles, it says sales minus expenses equals profit, right? The foundational formula of GAAP. People misunderstand. They think I say that's wrong. I don't think it's wrong. I think it's behaviorally wrong. I think logically that is what happens. But the behavioral response, how we've all been wired, is we look at what comes first. And it's human nature. When something comes first, we prioritize it. When something comes last, we delay it. So we're told sales minus expenses. So most businesses I look at, all they care about predominantly is what comes first. Sales. I got to sell more, sell more, sell more. Then they look at the next thing and say, I have to incur more. They don't say expenses. That's a bad word. They say, I need to grow more. I need to invest more. I need to plow back into my business more. That's all definitions of expense. I need to put more in the business to facilitate more sales. So most businesses are in this mentality of I need to sell to cover expenses, growth, therefore sell more, and they stay stuck in this formula. Profit, sadly, since it's the bottom line, that's the vernacular we use that comes last, isn't considered until maybe quarter end, or most businesses year end. We then get frustrated like, oh, there's no profit or it's negligible, maybe next year. So we literally delay the profit consideration for another 365 days. And for the remaining 364 days, we focus on sales, expense, sales, expense. So it's so ingrained in our entrepreneurial societal belief that it actually is hurting businesses. They are growing out of business, not going out of business, they're growing out of business. So we need to have this new realignment of have pride in profit. It is really what we want and focus on profit first.
So I usually tell my clients, we're talking about conscientious profit. Like you said, not gouging. We're being very conscientious with our profit, conscientious consumerism, that whole thing. I've also worked with a couple of sales coaches who I love, and I think they have a really great job. But sometimes they can have the focus so much on that top number that they don't understand that. I think one of the most beautiful things you said is that's not the value of your company. The value of your company is real revenue. The value of the company is what falls through. For some of us, it might look like gross profit, but if we really did the profit first methodology, that real revenue, that's really what we have to run our company on. And now, how great are we doing with that? And in my industry, the majority of the companies, I won't say all, but the majority are sole proprietors and LLC. So that lack of net profit, or that $3,000 at the bottom, isn't just profit. It's profit and salary. And then that brings up a whole nother, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And I'll tell you, my experience is they don't even look at it on day 364, 365. They look at it on April the 14th, the next year for the prior year, where they have zero opportunity to affect change.
Yeah, it's a very historical look. So I'm based out of New Jersey, as you know, and the quintessential New Jerseyans are here. Admittedly, I'm partly it. I get a little crazy. And there's this one guy I met who was so New Jersey, like what you'd see on the Jersey Shore television show. And he's like, I got $10 million. I got a $10 million company, man. And it was in home construction. Well, I asked him, I said, you have a $10 million revenue business, but let's get to that concept of real revenue. What are you really generating? Well, ended up, he spent an extraordinary amount of money on supplies, sheetrock and electrical componentry and whatever, and a significant amount of money on contractors, truly independent business owners, the plumber, the electrician, and so forth. When we went through it, the accounting, it was about $9 million that went out for supplies and these contractors. So I said, what's happening is you pull in $10 million of revenue from your customers, but you don't even really touch it. You are then in turn giving it to the supply house and these contractors. Effectively, the customer, if they wanted to, could just do that on their behalf and say, here's who we're using, right? And the contractor said, yes. So I said, you have left over $1 million. You're being paid $1 million to render your service, which is the management of all those different resources and people, right? And he said, yes. So I said, I want you to realize your real revenue is $1 million. You got to stop acting like the $10 million guy and spending money like that. We got to start behaving like a $1 million business and living within those confines. And if you get real with that, you can have a flourishing business. I actually subsequently lost touch with him. I wonder and hope he's done it. But I sadly see these businesses that are living up to their revenue and not living up to their true profitability, their real revenue.
Okay, so I love that point, because it is true. And there's this this idea that the more our company earns, we're supposed to look a certain way and act right? Drive a certain car, be in a certain area. And then there's some sales gurus who will tell you, you need to look like you're as rich as you think. You know what I'm talking about, right? So you need to look the part and all of this. Okay. But let's talk about your first two books, because I think the first two books are what help us get out of that mentality from two different approaches, right?
Sure.
So your first is Toilet Paper Entrepreneur. And I love that, because that's the way I started my business. Very, very scrappy. And I started a drapery workroom in the year 2000 in the sitting room of our bedroom, because I didn't have anywhere else. And I started it on a plastic table with a Kenmore sewing machine and drafting table, and started making money. And then I started realizing, so it was like, it could have been garage. It just happened to be up there. And finally the business grew. Scrappy. I was as scrappy as I could be. Still wasn't profitable, but scrappy. And it kept growing. And finally my husband said, you're no longer working in our bedroom. We're sleeping in your workroom. You got to go. So he moved to the basement.
That's funny.
It took over everything. But talk about some of the lessons in Toilet Paper Entrepreneur that you think can help us. Well, first is to realize our real revenue. So for anybody who's listening, I've got a great course for interior designers that will help you understand how to implement with our industry specific needs. So I'll put that in the show notes. But talk to us, Mike, about in that particular book, how we can be scrappy by looking at the real revenue and really living within the means of our company. Because I think that book has some very great detail on how.
Thank you. Yeah, I wrote that book. It was my angry teenage years. And kind of, that was the first book where I just looked back at my own personal history as an entrepreneur and said, oh my gosh, everything I was doing was wrong, and kind of retaliated against my beliefs of, fake it till you make it. You got to show it like you were being coached yourself, and started to reevaluate and studied wildly successful businesses from Burt's Bees to 1-800-GOT-JUNK to Life is Good. I remember meeting with the two brothers who founded that business. and found that their principles for success were radically different than what I thought. It was actually, in the core principle of the toilet paper entrepreneur is it's the lack of resources that are our biggest benefits. Yet many of us, myself in particular, did not realize that. The lack of money actually brings about innovative thinking, approaching standard challenges in new ways. I could have put down $50,000 and got a shop and get some, high-end sewing equipment and machines and start a business. But you said, I don't have the funds to do it. I'm starting it in my bedroom, and look at the business. It's eventually built and spawned. It's unbelievable. It's that lack of resources that triggered innovative thinking, and I think actually, I would argue, gave you a strategic leg up. So it's the lack of resources that makes us think outside the box, get things done frugally but effectively. The other thing I found is the lack of contacts and a network. And many of us say you gotta have that established network of people. Often we look at our friends and say, "Hey, I'm making something. Would you buy it from me?" That's my network, and they will placate us by buying. They say, "Well, we're in the same community." And we take that as an affirmation that we have a good product or service. It's actually the lack of a network that requires you to sell to strangers. And when you can sell to strangers, they speak the truth, not through their words, but through their wallets. And when they like your product, they'll spend. When they don't, they have no affinity towards you otherwise. They'll say, shove off, goodbye. So the lack of a network is actually your advantage because you have to prove a good concept. And then it's the lack of experience. The funny thing is I thought I needed to know the industry to be successful. What I found is the lack of knowledge that brings about out-of-the-box thinking, challenging the industry norms. When we know the industry, we follow the protocol of the industry, and we immediately put ourselves right against the more established competitors who have a leg up. They've been around longer. But when we don't know the industry, we just break the rules because we didn't even know what the rules were, and the customer notices. We become different and we stand out. So Toilet Paper Entrepreneur is about leveraging lack. It is actually your biggest advantage.
I think the challenge is when we no longer have that lack, still working under Toilet Paper Entrepreneur ideas. Because I know as my business has grown, there have been times where I've thought to myself, well, I can just go do that. And there's one question in the book, I can't remember the guy that you spoke to, but I think that was the book. It could have been Pumpkin Plan, but the challenge was, do I have to have that today or can I wait until tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay. Can I wait another day? Can I wait another day? And then at some point you're like, gosh, I didn't even need that. Why was I thinking that I did? And then sometimes it's like, no, I need it. And I needed it yesterday and I better go do it now or I'm going to limit. But it's almost giving yourself a framework to say, just because everybody else has it or I'm being told that I need it, do I need it? I'll be honest. I went through the same process creating my podcast. Because you can start a podcast scrappy and you can start it with everybody doing everything for you. And I'm somewhere in the middle, but closer to the scrappy side. And because my goal here is not to make this a money drain on my business, right? And so really trying to keep those principles in mind. Do I need it? Do I need it now? What is the way, which pieces are worth paying for? And which pieces is the free version fine? Or is there another way to do it? Or not knowing what I'm doing and just doing it.
Finding that balance is so important because we can go totally without. I mean, you could do a podcast over, 2 soup cans and a wire string. I'm sure you could try to figure that out, but it would be an abomination, right? We can go too frugal. There's a level where frugality goes to cheapness, and that undercuts us.
Exactly.
There's a point too where the spend becomes not effective but excessive, and that hurts us. So we got to find the balance in between. And the strategy you're referring to a story. The guy's name I remember distinctly, Paul Scheider, the one day at a time guy. And what he would do is we were driving to buy we need to get some electrical stuff when we were driving by Home Depot. And I said, oh, there's Home Depot. Why don't we get the electrical stuff? And he said, I haven't put enough time into this yet. He goes, let me wait one more day. And what he would do is he thought that electrical equipment or whatever would benefit him, but he hadn't allowed enough time to happen to see if it really would benefit him. So he intentionally put a gap in. He would make a declarative saying, I think I need electrical stuff, but I'm not going to buy it. I'm just paying attention to it. And he let day after day after day go by and see, does that difficulty keep raising his head. If it does, then he needs to buy it, because if he doesn't, he's being cheap. But if he realizes, it isn't actually negatively affecting us negatively, then he realized that if he did spend the money, he's moving to excess. So that strategy of just delaying or deferring a purchase or spend of money just by a day gave him this clarity. And I try to use that. I'm not so disciplined, but I try to use that for myself.
So to me, that is kind of the crux of the Profit is a Choice podcast.
Yes.
That every day we have a choice. And so that means with choice and decision comes awareness. And so that just means we need to be aware that what we're doing, who we're hiring, what we're buying, not doing, not hiring, because everything matters. Everything matters. And I don't want to make it so important that it feels like we are scared of every movement, but it truly all matters. I mean, I can point to every time I've had terrible mistakes, and half the time either I acted too quickly or rarely did I act too slowly. Almost every time I acted too quickly, or I didn't think about it all the way, or I thought it sounded good in the moment, or whatever. And so I just want us all, I think to get out of entrepreneurial poverty, which is our ultimate goal here for this sustainability, is to think about what we're doing and understand everything has a ripple effect.
Yeah, I have a little saying that I use. I say profit doesn't happen in piles. Profit happens in pennies. It's making profit a perpetual habit. Every transaction, just as you said, every transaction matters. And maybe there's a dime of profit here and maybe there's a few dollars there, but it's this cumulative effect. And if we don't make profit a perpetual habit, if it's not baked into every transaction, it actually never happens. Waiting for profit to be an eventuality, that one big pile of money to come in, it doesn't. And in the freak chance it does, like you win the lottery, people who aren't prepared and have that discipline, the money bleeds right back out overnight.
So I heard, I don't know if it was a Chinese proverb, or I don't know if it was in a fortune cookie. I don't know where I heard it, but it said a rich man will stop to pick up a penny.
Yeah, there you go.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you think you've got money, you're like, I've got plenty, I don't need to pick that up. But even a rich man, a wealthy man, knows that every penny counts. And I think that's kind of the idea to have in mind as we're building these businesses, is every penny counts. And I'm going to stop and pick up every penny along the way, because over time, that compound effect, right? I'm going to have it. All right. So now let's jump into Pumpkin Plan. So we've done Toilet Paper Entrepreneur. We're scrappy. We're making good decisions. We're living within the means of our business. Hopefully at this point, we've layered a little bit of profit first on top of it.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay. So Pumpkin Plan. I've got to tell you, I love the story that you've told, and I don't want to spoil it, but about the biggest pumpkin. But I would say there were two things that book did for me, because we've all heard target market, ideal client. I mean, I almost think they're thrown around so much, Mike, that we almost don't even, we're just like, yeah, I've done that. Yeah, I've thought about that. But a couple of exercises that you had in that book was, and I've worked with my clients to do that, is to really think about what resources are truly available in my company, and how do I want them to be perceived? How do I want to execute? How do I want to provide for my client? Layer that with who is the ideal that I want to work with, and then step back and look at your current client list and ask yourself, which of the clients, I did mine two ways. I did which of the clients are taking the most time, and I did most time to least time. And then I did it and said, now who's paying me the most? And then I layered them together.
Love it.
So that I could just think about it differently. And I realized that the clients that were taking the most time were usually the ones that were paying the least amount of money. And the clients that took the least amount of time, who were more of my ideal client, I didn't have to spend as much on them to keep them happy and to keep them satisfied and almost over-serviced to some degree. That was a big eye-opener for me on Pumpkin Plan, because I think we have in our mind who we're serving and how we're doing it, but I don't know that we really understand that relationship.
I agree. So as I was, I'm admittedly eccentric and study things that I think a lot of people don't necessarily see a parallel truth in, but I stumbled across pumpkin farming. And as I was studying this, just out of pure curiosity, I was like, oh my gosh, the parallels between growing colossal pumpkins, specifically growing a colossal business, are uncanny. The goal of the Pumpkin Plan is to share a methodology to grow a business larger, scale it, but organically and healthily. That's the key. Anyone can get an infusion of, not anyone can get an infusion of cash, but if anyone could get an infusion of cash, it's easy to grow the business very quickly because you can just throw gobs of money at it. But that doesn't mean it's healthy. So the question that inspired me was, how do we grow healthily, organically, quickly? And one of the elements that you alluded to, which is my favorite part, is the client cloning. What I mean by client cloning is we have an elective. We have the ability to choose which customers of ours that we want to clone. When we leave it to kind of haphazard growth, most businesses actually replicate their worst clients. And when I'm saying worst clients, I'm not suggesting these are bad people. I'm just saying they're a bad fit for our business. As you pointed out, consume a lot of our time, to pay us disproportionately less money. Some of our worst fit customers will chew up all our time, pay us very little, complain about the work, threaten us. I will put this on Yelp and say how bad you are, mandate that we redo the work and still not pay us. Like, that's the bottom of the barrel, and that happens. Yet it seems that for most businesses, perhaps your listeners, Michelle, get more of those clients than the exceptional, phenomenal one. Why is that? Well, it's our default behavior is to address and hopefully serve this customer, the bad customer, well enough that they're no longer disappointed with us. So we actually concentrate our effort and time, as you calculated, on our bad customers. Now think about this bad customer. From their perspective, they're like, wow, I required that they redo my work. They met these new audacious requirements I set, and they actually did it. And I didn't pay them a dime. This is the best company I've ever worked with in my life. I'm going to tell all my friends who are the same as them. Birds of a feather flock together. So they actually start marketing for you, saying, yeah, there's this one company that finally, they stunk, but they catered to me and I didn't have to pay them. Do you want to work with them? And people are like, don't have to pay, get the work I want? Yes. And we constantly attract bad customers. We have to be very cognizant about who we're paying attention to. Redefine the best customer as the true best. And I define that by a customer who pays us extraordinarily well because they see the value in that they're deriving from us, that we can serve very efficiently, and that we get joy out of serving them. We do the work we like to work. Once we define them, set out by cloning to clone them. You do it by giving them preferential treatment. Not my mom was wrong. Not everyone's the same. Don't treat everyone the same. Treat your best customers best. Uber cater to them. That's part of it. Then we can go through, and I explain in the Pumpkin Plan, a replication strategy to find out what I call congregation points, where they congregate, to tap into what I call the vendor well. There's many ways to clone our best customers, but we first have to define them and then be very deliberate about the cloning process.
And I think sometimes the difficulty is even defining who we want our ideal to be, especially for some of the newer businesses. I know when I first started, I didn't know who my ideal client was. I mean, I had an idea that they needed what I had, but I had not, like, I'll give you a prime example. When I first started even my coaching business, which I came into after having owned two other businesses by myself or with partners, I came in really planning that business out, like really giving it forethought that maybe I didn't give the first two. And originally my company was for coaching and consulting women in business. And I started realizing that when I had coaching clients, when I would suggest things that they needed to do, they went and did it. And when I had clients that came in under a more consulting label, Mike, they were the worst because they were the ones that complained. They were the ones that wanted me to go do it all. And I started going, what is the difference? And it was in their mind, consulting meant that it was all my job to make them look better, do better. But under coaching, they realized they were the one in the game. And I'm on the side kind of calling the play or telling them, look to the left, look to the right. I went in and my company name still has consulting in it, but I took consulting out of my website.
Fascinating.
And I changed it to consultative coaching or coaching with a consultative twist. And then those people were bought in. And it was literally a word that changed the way they saw their responsibility in our business relationship.
Just as a quick aside, it's amazing, this power of labels. I love what you did. There was a company in Brazil, and sadly, I don't remember the company's name at the moment, but they manufactured bottles, like Coca-Cola bottles or whatever. And but a huge variety. And if you look at anyone's wine collection, the variety of bottles just in wine can be pretty astonishing. This company that made bottles in Brazil was falling behind in its innovative designs. And they use a very interesting technique to become the leader again in the industry. They changed the labels of their employees. They used to be called line workers. If you were in the factory making bottles, you were a line worker. They changed their titles to engineers. They didn't get paid more. They weren't trained on anything new. They just started calling them engineers. And when they became engineers, they started living under this new title and said, oh, we can design this bottle differently, and became a leader in innovation again. I think we better not discredit the power of labels. And sadly, many times we label something for a bad outcome. I'm accused of this. I was my own children. I say, you're not trying hard enough. You fail to try. You're lazy. And the danger here that I've done with my own children is they see themselves as, I guess I'm lazy. And now it's an excuse not to. Thank God I had this awareness to say, oh my gosh, maybe I'm the one causing this. And I said, now I acknowledge the strength and say, you're a driver. You get through challenges. You see it to the end. And they started to take on this new label. And I think it's improved their lives. I think we have to be cognizant. We influence our clients the same way.
That's
our
right.
Employees the same way.
Yeah. And I think you did spend time in Pumpkin Plan at the beginning at helping us, not necessarily with the term label, but helping us identify who we wanted to be in business. Because again, my business, even though I'm still coaching, I started in January 2013, I'm on the 5th, 6th year. It's not the same as it was. And giving myself the ability to realize my business is growing and changing. My ideal client target market is, my big pumpkins are changing. I don't have the same big pumpkins that I had when I started, and that's okay. And I am I'm more than fine with that. Yeah. And my clients should be more than fine. Chances are, they're not coming out as an interior designer. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I will say by and large, their first job is not in a multi-million-dollar home. Their first job is usually serving someone who lives in a very similar way that they do. Yeah. And over time, they're able to, increase the size job they have and the level of client that they have. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think Pumpkin Plan gives us kind of the prescription for kind of, here's where I am now. Here's what it looks like now. Here's where I want to go. Mm-hmm. Now, how do I get there?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So we're not stuck.
Yeah, you're not stuck. The right size business, the right type of business can and should find you.
Mm-hmm. So one year when in my sewing business, I found out my son had dyslexia. Mm-hmm. And that was a hard year for us because we found out 2 months into the school year and we could not get him into a special class. And the cost to teach him was like, I don't know, it was almost $200 an hour and he needed 3 a week. Ooh. I didn't have an extra $600 after taxes to do that. And so what I did that year was I made the decision that I was going to try to earn the same amount of money that I had earned before. I went to school to learn how to teach him. I went and learned Orton-Gillingham method myself because it was only $1,000. That was 1 week of training for him. Yeah. Right. So I go learn it. I come back. And my whole goal that year was to work half the time and make the same amount of money. And it did 2 things. It made me focus on real revenue, even though I didn't know the term at the time. It made me do what we're going to talk about in Clockwork, create some efficiencies. And It made me choose the right clients and the right jobs. So if people weren't willing to pay what I needed to pay for the time that I had available, I wouldn't work with them. And at the time, I don't know that I really realized what I was doing. It was a toilet paper. I didn't really have a choice. But I'm telling you, at the end of that year, when I realized that I had made the same amount of money that I made the year before, and I worked half the time, well, now I have a different opportunity for growth that's not dependent on just taking more and more work and more clients. I didn't even realize what I had done until I was on the other side of it. And now I look back at the gift of the struggle that we had with our son and what it did to our family, because it actually improved everything in our family. And it's a lesson I've never forgotten. And so now when I start feeling overwhelmed, I step back and I go, okay, how can I make the same amount of money and do less, work less? How can I level up my client base? How can I level up my offerings? How can I give them more than they are paying for, but work less? What do I do?
there's a statue dedicated to what you've done. It's called The Thinker, one of the most famous statues of all time, albeit that's a naked guy with his chin on his fist. But it's sad that there's this context out here that we need to hustle and grind right now. Workaholism was kind of the prior term that we were using. And I think we're misunderstanding what that means. I think it means putting our best foot forward. We have to do that. But I think it's being interpreted that everything must weigh on our shoulders. And the only way to progress our business is by working harder. And that's not right. It's about working smarter. Ask those questions, those big questions like that. How do I generate double my revenue in half the time or whatever it is? And our mind starts thinking at it. I just love your story. And that's the reality. We need to think more about our outcomes and ask the better questions to get the better results.
Right. One of the things too, and I mentioned this to Ron on a call that I had with him the other day at Profit First headquarters, is that book, 212, The Extra Degree. Yeah. I don't know if so the thing there are two things he says in that book. He starts off that at 211 degrees, water is hot. At 212, it boils. Yeah. Boiling water creates steam, and steam powers a locomotive. But one of the things that he says is that we have to be as committed to the journey and the process as we are to the outcome. Because if we are only committed to the outcome, and I think that's true for everything that you teach, the minute it doesn't happen, or the minute we get a setback, or the minute, it didn't work the way we thought it would work, it's easy to give up. I think that's the thing with Profit First, is we have to be committed to the process and the journey, knowing that it may be 2 or 3 steps forward and 1 back, equally as much as we are to that outcome. Not just outcome focused, but journey, process, growth focused. The outcome's going to follow that. Have you found that in your experience? Oh my gosh, yeah. And a little insight, I am starting to research my next book, and it is about the journey. I'm still playing it out, but I think when we find purpose, or if you believe calling, once we define that, and I understand for some people it's God-given, for some people it's self-given, and that's fine. But once we have clarity on a purpose, the journey then becomes very rewarding. And for myself, I've been very blessed to have a very clear calling for myself. The journey is no longer a slog to get to the outcome. Every moment, even if it's difficult, is still rewarding. And I think I've also realized for myself is with clarity on purpose, is that every day as I work on it, it actually increases my energy. Yeah, I'm tired at the end of the day and I want to sleep, but my mind is even further stimulated. And as long as I feel that every day, I know I'm congruent with my purpose and it's a joyful day. The interesting thing too is I think we can put such an audacious goal out there for ourselves that maybe it's never attainable, and that's okay. That's okay. The reward, of course, is the journey. And maybe we never even need to achieve that final tremendous outcome. Right. I'm a fan of Simon Sinek's Why. I actually have taught it in our industry probably for 4 or 5 years now. Even Jack Canfield talks about it in his book. He didn't define it quite the same, but it was the same outcome. And I'm like you, I am extremely clear on my why. I know, and I don't have a shadow of a doubt. And it has been consistent, and I've gone all the way back to the roots of it. And I know what, why, how. I got it. And that gives me peace in the journey. On one of the earlier podcasts, we're talking about fear and that feeling of fear. And I think Simon had it out there the other day that the feeling of fear and the feeling of excitement are the same physiological feeling. And so we get to change it and go, wait a minute, I don't have to define this as fear. I can define these butterflies and this sweaty palms and all of that as excitement. And that to me is what I've been trying to do over the last 4 or 5 years as my business has shifted and morphed and changed. And, I'm doing things now that I didn't even have on the plan. If somebody had asked me 5 years ago, I'm like, I don't know. Jennifer Dawn is one of my business coaches. And she wow. Yeah, I know. She's on the podcast as well. But I asked her, that's going to be fun. Yeah. But she asked me, I remember her asking me 5 years ago, what do you want? I actually met her at, actually it was 3 years and 15 at ProfitCon. Oh. And I was like, I don't know. I said, I know how I want to feel, but I don't know what it looks like. I said, and I'm okay with knowing how I want to feel in 3, 5, 10 years. because I almost feel like if I had so defined it, I would have missed opportunities and blessings. But by defining how I wanted to feel or what I wanted to put out into the world, it actually made me more open for the journey.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like that.
So talking about the journey, I want to jump. We talked about profit first, but I want to jump to your next book real quick, Surge, because I want to make sure we have time to talk about the last one. But in Surge, I think it's part of that journey of also knowing your industry and going, what's the next big thing?
Yeah.
And what am I going to do with that? Tell us a little bit about Surge and how it fits not only maybe the direction our company's going, but profitability.
Yeah. So Surge was a kind of follow-up to the Pumpkin Plan. And what I realized is the Pumpkin Plan was identifying the best clients, really building a business around what you do best, matching to the best clients and growing on that. There was one little but significant caveat is that the client changes. The person you married 20 or 30 years ago, I got married 21 years, is a different person today, and so am I. And if we stay with that vision of the client being exactly the same for the entirety of their lifespan, we will serve them in the same way, but their needs have changed, and actually it becomes discongruent and we lose business. We have to actually stay in front of the market shift and the customer shift. This is called market momentum, and every community niche has it. So in Surge, what I explain is how to identify a community and how it's starting to move. Then place your offering in front of them to proactively anticipate their needs. It is the best marketing method in the world. If you offer something to a customer that they are becoming aware that they need, and you're the one that's offering it, they will buy from you. So Surge is about catching the market momentum or the wave patterns of markets, putting your offering in front of it, and then catching the momentum of the wave.
Perfect. And I do think, our industry is changing like crazy. The interior design industry is.
Interior design?
Yes.
Oh gosh.
Changing like crazy. Radical.
Yeah.
The way we do business, the way we interact with clients, the tools and methods we use, everything. And even trends. Oh my gosh. You could just change them, just get in front of a trend. How many people, as much as they may hate shiplap right now, wish they had been Joe and Chip Gaines and shiplap with Fixer Upper, because they would be multimillionaires to come up with an idea to rip off, a wall and see old stuff on the wall and use it and make it an element. We all hate it now because we kind of overdone with it, but everybody I know wishes they had been on the surge of that.
Right. And there's a new surge coming, right? Because that industry is so affected by fashion, style.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's constantly changing. So I want to jump in real quick now and talk about Clockwork, because as we talked about before, I am, my degrees in information systems and making sure it's got to be repeatable. It's got to be efficient. Time is money. we have two currencies, time and money, spend them both properly. And Clockwork kind of ties all of that together. Tell us a little bit about that.
So Clockwork was, I studied the growth of businesses. And the first stage is we need to have sales for a business. Once we have sustainable sales, we actually need to move on to profitability, which we talked about, permanent profit. Once there's perpetual profit, there's sustainable sales, there is a higher level. And this is the freedom of time, so that you and I as entrepreneurs can do what we want, when we want in our lives. And if we so elect, in our business. Like the goal of Clockwork, I call it design your business to run itself. It gives you the freedom to do what you want back in your business if that's what you so desire. Not all of us want to leave our business. So it's a process of extracting us from our business. What I realized as I was doing my research is there's books about systemization. And actually one of my all-time favorites is E-Myth by Michael Gerber.
Love it, right?
He says, don't work in your business, work on your business. But what I believe is entrepreneurs have been interpreting that as a parent-child relationship. What I mean is I'm the parent of my business. I birth the business. I nourish my business. I protect my business. Over time, it becomes an adolescent and then an adult, and it has its own legs and it'll give back to me. But in reality, I don't believe it's a parent-child relationship. I believe it's more like conjoined twins. As the business goes, so do we. We share critical organs, vital organs. We share the same legs. And if my business is sick, I will feel that stress and sick. And if I am struggling, my business will struggle. Therefore, the process of separating us is a very surgical, deliberate process of disconnecting those critical organs and so forth. And one day, finally separating those conjoined twins so they can live independently. We will always share the same soul, but now we're independent organisms. The benefit here is now we can we can experience the life back in our business the way we define it. And what I found is when we are able to remove ourselves from our business, is we have the highest value, not just to potential acquirers, because they know they have a plug and play business. They're not depending on Michelle Williams. If you decide, you know what, I'm going to go to the beach and enjoy some Mai Tais, that the business suffers, they know that regardless of how you decide to participate, they've bought something that can sustain on its own. It's also of tremendous value to our clients, because if we are sick or have a family emergency or decide to just take off from the business, they won't be compromised. So there's super strength in the business not being reliant on us. That's what Clockwork's about.
Okay, so I was blessed enough to be one of the pre-readers for Surge and for Clockwork, and I enjoy that process a lot. By the way, so
I love your feedback.
Keep me on your pre-read list. But I think the thing about Clockwork that is so difficult in our industry is many of us are solopreneurs, so it is hard to separate who we are. I teach all the time: you are not your business. If the business goes away, you still exist, and you know, there is a conjoining there, but there's also the separation. And I think in our industry, for many that are alone, and especially with something that is so creative and coming out of their ideas and design over and over, like an artist, you know, there are some things that can be replicatable, but there are other things that are really hard. And I think that's a struggle for sure in that type of a niche industry.
Yeah. Especially when you're a small business, and I'm a small business too. You know, it's me and there's 10 people in total. We're tiny. And so there's dependencies on us to keep performing. In fact, myself, just in a couple of minutes, I got to hop on another thing because I don't have someone else to back me up. But what we realize is, as a small practitioner, we can start the process. Before we went live here, you were talking about the implementation of Infusionsoft and these other packages. And that's exactly the goal of a Clockwork business, is to not one day just stop working and I'm going to go on vacation, but it's to start removing elements of responsibility from ourselves and automating it through other resources, virtual help, and so forth. And over time, we will get to that point where we can remove that last piece from us. And that's when we're totally independent of our business.
Thank you for that. And so I'm going to highly recommend. When does Clockwork? It just came out, didn't it?
August 21st is the official release day, which is Tuesday, August 21st.
Excellent. And I'll have a link to that and to all of your books in the show notes. I cannot recommend enough your books. And I know it sounds like I'm being crazy, but I'm just serious. I use them in my coaching practice. I use aspects of them all the time, and I just can't recommend them enough. And so, I also just want to tell everybody that if you will leave us a review on iTunes, that I will send a Profit First book to the first 10 people who leave an iTunes review. So if you want a free book, give me a free review and I'll send you one. Okay. Mike, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I'm going to have to bring you on again because you're writing more books all the time. That's part of it.
It would be an honor to come back.
We're just going to keep talking about them over and over because I think there's so much richness, and I mean, the conversations could go on forever.
Well, it's a joy being here. Thank you for having me, and congratulations on your show. This is an amazing show.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.